Today, we're continuing the committee's work to combat the COVID-19 pandemic by looking at its disproportionate impact on environmental justice communities. And it's heartbreaking to think that more than 100,000 Americans have died from this horrible virus. It's also alarming to see the devastatingly high rates of infection and death for communities of color, low income communities, Native American communities, and fence line communities, those that, for example, the communities adjacent to chemical plants or Superfund sites, of which we have many in my home state of New Jersey. And we often refer to these communities as environmental justice communities because they're the ones most in need of environmental justice. For too long, the people living in these communities have borne a disproportionate share of pollution and its health risk. It's these risks that are contributing to people of color dying from the coronavirus at significantly higher rates than others. And we've long known that particulate matter and other forms of air pollution cause respiratory disease, including asthma. We've also known that low income communities and communities of color are exposed to higher concentrations of air pollution because for years, polluters have chosen to build their facilities in these communities. And as a result, low income people and people of color suffer greater incidence of respiratory disease and other adverse health effects. And now we have scientific evidence showing a direct link between communities living with more air pollution and high rates of COVID-19 deaths. So we simply can't allow this to continue. And unfortunately, the Trump administration is only making the public health and environmental crisis worse. When the Trump administration rolls back protections under the Clean Air Act, it hurts these communities most. When this administration announces that it will not enforce some environmental laws and regulations during the pandemic, that hurts these communities too. And when President Trump issues an executive order circumventing the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, that completely cuts the voices of these communities out of the decision-making process. So this subcommittee continues to focus on fighting for environmental justice. And Representative Ruiz already spoke, led the effort to increase environmental justice grants in response to COVID-19 as part of the HEROES Act, which passed the House last month. Representative McEachin, the co-author of that bill, has also been a leader in developing other comprehensive legislation on environmental and climate justice. And I also wanted to thank Chairman Tonko and Rush for working with me to include an environmental justice section in our Clean Future Act that we unveiled in January. So this hearing is happening at a truly crucial moment in our nation's history. We're fighting a global pandemic. Tens of millions of Americans have lost their jobs. And of course, peaceful protesters are demanding racial justice following the murder of George Floyd. So we have a lot of work to do. I just want to thank the witnesses for joining us today.